In the last video, we took a look at the basic settings in AutoTune, and I did mention that we have another layer of preferences, if you will, that are available within settings. So we have our commonly used preferences that we can enable and disable, things that are useful, such as show waveform in main graph or use low latency, things like that. Let's go ahead and select the preferences, and you'll notice that we have this window over here. We can do a lot of different things. You might note that some of these options that we see over here, so for example, show waveform in main graph, these are available in both the preferences and the settings. And like I said, the main reason for that is that the settings menu was kind of consolidated to use some of the commonly used preferences and to be able to disable or enable them quickly as needed. So in this particular area, we can go a little bit deeper. Now we have some basic things that we can adjust, like for example, let's take a look at knob control, linear versus circular. This is pretty self-explanatory. So for example, right now this is set to linear, meaning if I move up or down that I can adjust the parameters over here as needed. But if I wanted to do something different, I could, for example, choose circular. I could then save that, and now I would need to make my circular motions, and if I tried to use up and down, it wouldn't work quite the same way. I'm going to go ahead and leave this in linear mode. Now here's something that's really important. We're going to come back to this in a later video, but the default retune speed for lines and the default retune speed for node objects. These functions are specifically to do with how AutoTune is going to react and the default values in which it displays. Again, we're going to come back to this. Auto scroll mode, we have smooth scrolling or we have screen by screen scrolling. This is just personal preferences. And then smooth scrolling delay, we have options between 1 and 5 with the default set to 2. Generally, I don't like to change any of these preferences unless it's something that impedes my workflow, and in which case I'll go ahead and change some of these parameters. Now here's something else that we can take a look at in terms of our window width. So we can actually set a completely different window width altogether. And it's worth mentioning that these are independent of each other. I don't actually see an option to lock the aspect ratio. So for example, if I wanted to change the window width to something a little bit more wider, maybe I could do 1200. I'll leave the height as is. We'll go ahead and save that. Now you can see that this is updated. You may have to close this plugin and open it up in order for this change to take effect, but this especially becomes useful in graphical mode when you want to have a little bit more real estate. Let's go ahead though. We're going to go back into our preferences and let's set this back to the default, which is 980. We will go ahead and save that. So now we're set back to our default setting. So we're pretty much done over here. A lot of this stuff is self-explanatory. So for example, MIDI control assignments. For each control in AutoTune listed below, you can select a MIDI control number, allowing MIDI CC commands to modify the specific control values. This is something you can look at if that's something of interest to you. And another thing we have is we have key bindings for top row of keys. So we have these are pre-mapped and predefined. If you wanted to change any of these, we could go ahead, select any one of these to change them if we wanted to do so. I'm going to go ahead and leave everything as default. We'll have a look at changing some of these functions over here a little bit later on down the line. And the last thing we have over here is check for updates. I have this set to automatically. We can check for updates simply by clicking this button, and AutoTune will indicate that it is up to date, so we can just go ahead and close this. Okay, also worth mentioning that the check for updates is also available in our main preferences window. So that is pretty much it with everything to do with GUI, the basics, the preferences, and the settings. We've also talked about using AutoKey. We have our proper scale set for this particular performance. In the next video, we're going to dive right in and talk about working in auto mode or automatic mode, which is my favorite or preferred method to use when working with AutoTune. So we'll catch you for more in the next video.